I am certainly happy to be back. And thank you for your beautiful prayer, Hope, and for Star Tom for your music. And in the midst of all of that, you've experienced me before. You're going to hear things a little differently. And so in Unity, we just take it in. And the thing that we want to keep in mind is there's no requirement to believe. There is simply a desire that you understand. Let me put it that way. Okay, so let's get romping with this. Thank you for having me back, and sit back and relax. There's no test, no quiz. There's just wanting you to understand. My email address is alberthasselbeck@gmail.com. My website is paulhasselbeck.com, and my podcast can be found at metaphysicalromp2.com. And you might want to have your cell phone handy and you can take pictures of my slides. Okay, so whose will is it anyway? Well, this is fundamentally a 12 powers talk. And we're going to look at the basics around the 12 powers. We're going to talk about a couple scriptures, and then now what? So really now what is, what can we do with these powers, especially the power of will? So I want to begin with this concept. Myrtle Fillmore said in How to Let God Help You, God is it, neither male nor female, but principle. And Charles Fillmore defined God as the universal principle, which includes all principles. And I like to add that Eric Butterworth said, God is spirit, present in its entirety at every point in space at the same time. God is spirit, present in its entirety at every point in space, all at the same time. So that means the divine is right there at the point of view. And what I like to say is we are fully divine and fully human. And so the basics around the 12 powers, everyone has them, whether conscious of them or not. Everyone is always using them, whether conscious of them or not. The powers don't care how they are used. In fact, the powers, and in fact, every principle is essentially benign. These powers, these principles, these divine ideas in our humanity can be overdeveloped or underdeveloped, and we can use them at all states and levels of consciousness. So the level of your consciousness determines the quality of the use of every principle, primarily the 12 powers. And so let's look at the power of will. Well, essentially, it's our executive faculty, our executive power. It's our ability to choose, decide, command, direct, and determine. And I think you can always already see how important this is, because we're always directing ourselves in one way or another. And the power of will is associated with the Apostle Matthew. The color is silver. It works with love, understanding, and wisdom. And you're going to learn a lot about that at the end. And the location, Charles said, was located here in the front forebrain. And since understanding is there, we can say they're there together. And so let's look at the power of will, your power of will underdeveloped. Well, when we're underdeveloped, we have a hard time making a decision. We have a hard time making choices. And we can say they're overdeveloped. And when will is overdeveloped, we can said to be pig-headed. Now, in order to be fully pig-headed, you got to be engaging your power of strength too. Strength is that power we use to persevere and stick with something. So will can be overdeveloped and underdeveloped. And then we get to those quotes. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. And your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So what about that? Well, I think it's important we look at these. First of all, while these are Bible scriptures, I don't see the Bible as a body of work that should be taken without any consideration, without bringing any of our intelligence to it. In fact, Unity once had a course that was called Relationships in the Bible. And I remember the teacher who was teaching it saying at the beginning of the class, I'm not sure why we have this course, because I'm not sure the Bible is a good resource to learn how to do relationships well. And I would say, I really agree with that. And so when we're talking about the will of God, what are we talking about? And when we're talking about divine will and divine purpose, what are we talking about? And if we're talking about divine plan, and if we're talking about the divine guidance, what are we talking about? Well, in my opinion, God doesn't have a will like we do. God is the principle of will that we use to give ourselves direction. And so it's not really proper to say will of God, that God has a will. God is the principle or power of will. In fact, we could say that about all the 12 powers. And remember that definition from Charles Fillmore? God is the universal principle which contains all principles. So any principle that exists, God is. God doesn't have them. And every one of those principles is present at the point of view. Every last one of them in its entirety. And so divine will and divine purpose, then what is it if there isn't this God that's determining what we do or giving it a purpose? Well, divine will or divine purpose is generic. It's amorphous. It's non-specific and is exactly the same for everyone. In fact, if everyone was assigned a different purpose by God, then God would change. Because as soon as a new baby was born, God would have to create a purpose for that. And that creates change in God. And so one of the fundamental concepts is God does not change. God is the unchangeable. And what's good about that is the God of my childhood changed, was unreliable in some ways, was unpredictable, and I thought a little moody. But a God that doesn't change is utterly dependable. And when we think of God is the universal principle which contains all principles, each one of those is utterly dependable. And when we talk about divine plan, the divine plan is how each person, it's how I decide to bring forth, manifest, demonstrate my purpose, your purpose in our unique way. In fact, if we think of us as fully divine and fully human, there's kind of an interaction between the two. And from my humanity, using my divinity, from my humanity, using these immutable and changeable principles, I decide what my purpose is. And in fact, when I finally figured that out in the early 90s, I decided my plan and my purpose for this life was to help others help themselves get happier. And the vehicle I use for that are these wonderful Unity teachings. And so what about divine guidance? So divine guidance is an urge, an energy, an inner knowing by which you and I can make the best choices in terms of our own consciousness. There isn't a God saying go this way and go that way. There is God that is principle that we are using at the current level of our consciousness decide to go this way and that way. And I call that process my inner knower. And it's not independent from my humanity, because my humanity and my divinity are one. So knowing all that, now what? Well, I want to show you one thing. So will is our chooser. We use will to make choices. We use it to make decisions. We use it to direct ourselves. We use it to command ourselves, and sometimes to command others. And the reason why we make choices is because we desire. The power of love is our desire. And so desire is what's choosing or directing or impelling our chooser. Our chooser. Now, if we use our chooser without using any of the other principles, we probably won't choose so well. And so there's a couple other powers here that are involved, or we can choose to involve them in this process of choosing. And so in order to choose well, we have to use our power of understanding. I call it my knower. We have to understand, we have to know what choices we have before we can make a choice like that. So think of this. When you go into your kitchen in the morning and you're desiring breakfast, you first have to know what are the options you have there. Do you have cereal? Do you have toast? Do you have eggs? Do you have a toaster? Do you have a stove? So you can see you have to know what's available to you for making breakfast in order to choose the breakfast you want. However, you want to add another component, and that, my friends, is your power of discernment. Now, you've heard this called the power of judgment or the power of wisdom. Well, since judgment is associated with negativity these days, and since wisdom is connected with choosing good things, I don't think that's the best name for this power. I think we should call it our discernment. It's the principle of discernment. And we use it to compare and contrast. We use it to evaluate. So when you go in desiring breakfast into your kitchen and you figure out all the things you know you have, then you compare and contrast what they are so you can make the best choice. So really what's happening is when we have desire, we're knowing things, and then we're comparing and contrasting them to come to the best decision that's for us at that current level of consciousness. Now, having breakfast is an easy thing, but we go through life and we encounter situations where we have to make very complex complex choices. Just think of the choices we've had to make in the context of this COVID pandemic. Just think of the choices a parent must make for their children. Just think of the choices a school board must make around their schools. And so knowing that we have this mechanism within us, and in fact, what I say is we are always desiring. We move from desire to desire to desire, from the moment we wake up to the moment when we go to bed. And when we go to bed, we set an alarm for the time we desire to wake up. And we choose that time to wake up based on what we know, don't we? And so if we're moving, or since we are moving from desire to desire to desire, and since we are always choosing one thing or another, then it's important we understand this mechanism. And then on top of that, it can become a diagnostic tool. So what do I mean by that? Well, this is it. If you make a bad choice, and you know that usually in retrospect, don't you? Sometimes right away, oh my God, I thought that was a good idea, when really it wasn't. So when we make a bad choice, we can invest some time and look at, well, was there something wrong with my use of the principle of love, my ability to desire? Or maybe I wasn't knowing as well as I could. Maybe I wasn't knowing everything that I could. And maybe it's our evaluator that's defective, that maybe we're not using our power of discernment in the most effective way. And so I think you might be getting that it's important that you understand the quality of your consciousness, because you use your power of love, your desire. You use your power of understanding, your knower. You use your power of discernment, your evaluator, and you use your power of will, your chooser, based on your level of consciousness. And this is why Unity places an emphasis on raising our consciousness, raising the overall quality of our thoughts, our ideas, our beliefs, our images, our feelings, our emotions, our perceptions, our experiences, and our attitudes. In fact, Charles called this raising of consciousness regeneration. We are regenerating our ability to make the best choices. We're raising our ability to use these principles that God is. God doesn't have them. God is these principles, using them to the best of our ability. And so whose will is it anyway? Well, God doesn't possess wills, but he is the principle or the divine idea or the power of will, whatever you call it. And that principle is ours to use. So we could say it's both God and us, and we use it from our humanity. So God is the principle of will, and that principle of will is present in its entirety at the point of view. And then you and I get to choose how we use it. And so as you go forth today, I want you to think about the choices you make. And I want you to think into, when you have a difficult choice to make, think about, what are you desiring? What is the outcome you want? And then what are you going to choose to get that outcome? And in order to do that, you're going to have to use your power of understanding to know what you have to work with, and your power of evaluation to figure out which ones you want to use and how you want to move forward. So friends, that's your power of will. Use it wisely. Thank you for listening. And so as I stop sharing, I'm going to take a sip of water. And I'm going to invite you now to join me in a time of meditation. And so make yourself comfortable, allowing that wherever you are, whatever you're sitting on, whatever you're laying on, you're just lying there, trusting that it is supporting you. Just as we support ourselves with these principles that God is. And learning about them helps us to use them wisely and to use them consciously. And so I always like to start with a few deep, calming breaths. These breaths are calming and connecting. So breathe in and breathe out. And breathe in deeply and breathe out. And let's do that one more time. Breathe in, breathe out. And feel your sense of presence right where you are. The reason you can know that and feel that right here and now is because God is the principle of omnipresence. And we use that to be present, to feel presence. And as we remember, we are fully divine, that every principle that God is present right here in their entirety. And even though we are fully and completely divine, we don't use the full extent of our divinity. And we are fully human. You are consciousness. You are body. And we're not using the full potential of our consciousness or the full potential of our body at any one time. And I want you to know that you use your consciousness to be the best you can be. And we be the best we can be by using our divinity as consciously as we possibly can. And so what I'd like you to do is take into this time of silence the affirmation, I am fully divine and fully human. I am fully divine and fully human. I am fully divine and fully human. And now repeat after me. I am fully divine. I am fully human. I am wondrously infinite in finite ways. Again, I am wondrously infinite in finite ways. You see, friends, you use your divinity, which is infinite. You use your divinity to manifest your humanity in very specific ways. And so let's say it one more time. I am wondrously infinite in finite ways. Yes, feel the truth of that. Feel your magnificence. And let's do it one more time. I am wondrously infinite in finite ways. And so you are, and so I am, and so it is. Amen. Friends, I invite you to go forth knowing that you are fully divine and fully human. I see you going forth, making it yet another beautiful day in your consciousness. And so it is.